$438,000, half my face covered in deep burgundy, and my mother told 300 people I should be grateful they let me attend. Port wine stain birthmark, the medical term for what I was born with, covering the left side of my face from my temple down through my jaw and continuing across my neck before stopping just above my collarbone. This wasn't something I could hide with makeup or strategic lighting, though I spent 12 years trying to do exactly that, because the people I thought were my family convinced me I owed them beauty I couldn't provide, so I gave them money instead. 3 people built their lives on my shame while I built their bank accounts with my salary, and every single one of them knew what they were doing because I found the group chat where they laughed about it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this started. The scarf collection in my closet had 43 pieces by the time I turned 30, each one carefully selected to drape across my neck and jaw in family photos. My mother Nadia bought most of them as gifts, wrapping them beautifully and presenting them with cards that said things like, "For my thoughtful daughter," or "Because you deserve beautiful things." And I wore every single one without questioning why she never bought scarves for my sister Dina, who had flawless olive skin and the kind of bone structure that made photographers ask if she modeled. The answer was always yes, by the way, because Dina did model, and her Instagram had 273,000 followers who commented on every photo about her perfection, her glow, her absolute stunning beauty that seemed almost otherworldly. I managed her brand deals starting in year 3 after Dad died, negotiating contracts and handling invoices and making sure she got paid on time, and I never took a commission, because she was my sister and I loved her. Plus, she let me be in her life despite my face, which was something my mother reminded me to be grateful for at least once a month. Dad died when I was 21 and Dina was 19. And the last thing he said to me happened at 2:47 in the morning in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and the weird vanilla air freshener they used to cover up other smells. His hand reached for my face, and like he always did, he touched the left side first, his fingers tracing the birthmark like it was something precious. "You listening?" he whispered, his voice rough from the tubes they'd removed an hour earlier. "I'm listening. You're perfect exactly as you are, and I need you to promise me you won't let them make you forget that." I nodded because I couldn't speak without crying, and tears were already falling on both sides of my face, making the birthmark skin feel tighter the way it always did when I cried. "Take care of them when I'm gone, your mother and your sister, because they're not as strong as you are, and they're going to need you." "I will. Promise me both things. That you'll remember you're perfect, and that you'll take care of them. I promise." He squeezed my hand and closed his eyes, and he was gone by 3:15, and I kept the second promise for 12 years while forgetting the first one almost immediately. The mortgage came first, appearing in my email inbox 6 days after the funeral with a red Urgent banner across the subject line, $2,100 monthly, and my mother sat across from me at the kitchen table with tissues pressed to her eyes, explaining through tears that she'd never handled the finances, that Dad took care of everything, that she didn't even know how to access the bank accounts. I was working as a junior accountant making $48,000 annually, living in a studio apartment that cost $900 monthly, and I had exactly $12,000 in savings that I'd been building since college. I transferred the mortgage to automatic payment from my checking account and moved back into my childhood bedroom to save the $900 in rent, telling myself it was temporary, just until Mom got back on her feet. Temporary turned into year 1, then year 2, then year 5, and somewhere in there I stopped counting, because the bedroom with the pale yellow walls and the window that looked out onto the garden became permanent in a way I never intended. Dina needed grief counseling, which made perfect sense because she'd been Daddy's little girl in the way that beautiful daughters always are, getting twirled around the living room and called princess and photographed constantly. The therapist cost $180 weekly, and insurance covered exactly none of it because she was seeing a specialist who only took private pay, and Mom asked me so carefully, so gently, if I thought I could help just until Dinah felt stable enough to process everything. 9 months of therapy at $180 weekly came to $7,020, and I paid every invoice on time while Dinah posted Instagram photos from coffee shops and boutique shopping trips with friends, her captions full of grateful heart emojis and references to self-care. College tuition arrived next, starting in year 2. Because Dina had gotten into a prestigious art school that cost $63,000 annually. She'd received a partial scholarship covering $21,000, leaving $42,000 in tuition plus another $6,000 for housing and $1,500 for the meal plan, and somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 for books and supplies and art materials. Mom sat me down again with that same gentle voice and explained that we couldn't let Dina's future suffer because of tragedy, that Dad would have wanted her to pursue her dreams, that education was the one thing no one could take away from her. I was 23 by then and had been promoted to senior accountant at $67,000 annually, and I'd been saving again, building the account back up to $18,000. I cleaned it out for the first semester and picked up freelance bookkeeping work on weekends to cover the second semester, and Dinah called me crying with gratitude, telling me I was the best sister in the world, that she'd pay me back someday when she was famous. Year 3 brought the house renovation that Mom said was essential because the deck was rotting and it was dangerous. Plus the roof had leaks and the kitchen cabinets were falling apart. The contractor quoted $18,000 for the roof, $4,000 for the deck, and another $8,000 for the kitchen, and Mom asked if I thought we could do it in phases, maybe just the essentials first. I paid for all of it at once, $30,000 that I took partially from savings and partially from a personal loan at 8.7% interest, because Mom mentioned casually that the deck was where Dad used to take family photos, where we had Christmas morning pictures and birthday celebrations, and I couldn't let those memories rot away. The photos continued after the renovation, but I appeared in fewer and fewer of them, always positioned in the back when I was included, and Mom started suggesting that maybe I didn't need to be in every shot, that sometimes she just wanted pictures of her and Dina, mother-daughter moments, and I understood that, didn't I? I understood. So I became the photographer instead, holding up phones and adjusting angles, and making sure the lighting caught Dina's face perfectly while I stood behind the camera where my face didn't matter. Year 4 was the study abroad program in Paris, $12,000 for the semester, and Dina sent exactly 2 postcards, both of them addressed to Mom, both of them featuring photos of the Eiffel Tower and descriptions of cafes and museums, with no mention of missing us or thinking of home. Years 5 through 7 blurred together in a stream of Venmo requests and apologetic text messages, rent payments when Dinah needed to focus on her art without the stress of a job, car insurance and registration when she needed reliable transportation for auditions, credit card payments when unexpected expenses came up, which they did monthly with remarkable consistency. I tracked everything in a spreadsheet because that's what accountants do, creating columns for date and category and amount and notes, watching the total climb past 50,000, then past 100,000, then past 150,000, and I told myself it was investment in family, that you can't put a price on taking care of the people you love. Year 8 brought the engagement, and I cried real tears when Dina called me, her voice high and excited as she described the proposal on a beach in Malibu. The photographer her boyfriend had hired to capture the moment, the ring that looked like something from a celebrity wedding. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and I said yes immediately, and she said she knew I would because I always came through for her, and that made me feel warm and necessary and loved. The bridesmaid dress arrived 6 weeks later with a note attached, Dinah's handwriting on cream cardstock that said, "Thinking long sleeves for elegance. What do you think?" With a link to 3 dresses, all of them with high necks and sleeves that extended to the wrist and silhouettes designed for maximum coverage. I ordered the one she'd marked with a star for $340 and told myself she was right, that long sleeves were elegant, that the wedding photos should have a cohesive aesthetic, that this wasn't about my birthmark, even though every other bridesmaid wore strapless dresses that showed their shoulders and collarbones and unmarked skin. The makeup artist consultation happened in year 9, presented as a gift from Dinah, a sister day at a fancy salon in Beverly Hills where we'd both get our makeup done professionally. The artist spent 40 minutes on my face, layering primer and color corrector and foundation in shades that almost matched. And when she finished, Dinah's fiancé Marcus came to pick us up and said, "Wow, you can barely tell." And Dinah beamed at him like he'd said something wonderful. I paid $890 for airbrush makeup services for the wedding day, the professional grade kind that the artist promised would last through tears and dancing and photographs. And I didn't let myself think about what exactly I could barely tell anymore, what exactly was being hidden, what exactly was so terrible about my face that it required 40 minutes of color correction to become acceptable. The wedding expenses started small and grew like something alive, feeding on my bank account until there was almost nothing left. Venue deposit in month 1, $12,000 for a garden estate in Pasadena that looked like something from a fairy tale. Catering deposit 2 weeks later, $18,000 for a company that specialized in elevated comfort food and botanical cocktails. Photography package in month 2, $8,500 for an artist who'd shot 3 celebrity weddings and whose Instagram had 500,000 followers. Florist in month 3, $6,000 for arrangements that Dinah described as organic and wild and perfectly imperfect. Her dress in month 4, $4,200 for a gown that required 3 fittings and alterations that cost another $680. Hair and makeup trials in month 6, $450 to test different looks, even though we both knew she'd look stunning in all of them. The requests came through text messages, always apologetic, always temporary, always necessary. Hey sis, can you cover the venue deposit? Marcus's bonus doesn't come through until next month and we'll lose the date. Quick favor, the photographer needs the deposit now. Can you spot us? We'll pay you back after the wedding when we combine finances. I paid every invoice knowing I'd never see the money again, but I told myself it didn't matter because this was Dinah's day, her moment, the wedding she'd been dreaming about since we were little girls, sharing a room and planning imaginary ceremonies with stuffed animals as guests. Year 10 brought the final avalanche of payments, and they came fast and urgent, each one necessary to prevent disaster. Venue balance of $31,000 due 6 months before the wedding. Catering balance of $47,000 due 3 months out. Band for $12,000, videographer for $9,000, invitations and favors and the rehearsal dinner, adding up to $23,000 more. I emptied my retirement account, taking the penalty and the taxes. And I took out a second personal loan at 11.2% interest. And I picked up a third freelance client doing bookkeeping on Sunday mornings. And I made every payment on time because Dinah needed this to be perfect. And I was the only one who could make that happen. The total came to $438,500. And I knew that number exactly because I kept the spreadsheet updated, watching it grow, telling myself it was worth it, that family was worth it, that love was supposed to cost something. Then I found the group chat, and everything I thought I knew turned into a lie I'd been telling myself for 12 years. It happened 3 weeks before the wedding during a fitting for my bridesmaid dress. Final alterations to make sure the high neck sat properly and the long sleeves didn't bunch at my wrists. Mom had come along, sitting in the corner of the boutique scrolling on her phone while the seamstress pinned and adjusted, and when she got up to use the bathroom, she left her phone on the chair, screen still lit. The notification popped up while I was standing on the fitting platform, and I could see it from where I stood 3 feet away. Group chat named The Mark, with a message from Dinah that said trying to get her to pay for Marcus's parents' hotel rooms, wish me luck with a crossed fingers emoji. My hands went cold, and I told the seamstress I needed a minute, and I stepped off the platform and picked up Mom's phone before I could stop myself, before I could think about privacy or boundaries or trust. The chat had 12 members, and I recognized all of them. Mom, Dina, Marcus's mother, Patricia, Dina's 3 best friends from college, 2 cousins from Mom's side, and 2 of Mom's friends from her charity board. Everyone important in our family, everyone except me. I scrolled up, and the messages went back 4 years, starting in year 6, right around the time Dina got serious about Marcus. Dina, year 6, asked her to cover my rent for 3 months. She said yes in like 5 seconds. This is too easy. Mom, year 6. Remember, you have to be gentle. She needs to feel necessary. Use words like only you understand, and I trust you more than anyone. Marcus, year 7. Wait, she's paying for how much of the wedding? Are you serious? Dina, year 7. 400,000 so far. She showed me her spreadsheet. She's so proud of it. It's honestly sad. Patricia, year 8. This is the one with the face thing, right? The birthmark. Mom, year 8. Port wine stain. Covers half her face. She's extremely self-conscious about it, which is helpful for keeping her compliant. Cousin Rebecca, year 8. That feels kind of manipulative. Mom, year 8. It's not manipulative to accept help that someone offers freely. She wants to do this. It makes her feel valuable. Dina, year 9. She asked if she could bring a +1 to the wedding. I told her the photographer charged per person and we were trying to keep costs down. She didn't push back at all. Marcus's mother, Patricia, year 9. So she's paying $500,000 for a wedding she can't even bring a date to. That's insane. Dina, year 9. She doesn't have anyone to bring anyway. Who's going to date someone who looks like that? I stopped breathing for a second. My eyes locked on that message, reading it twice to make sure I understood correctly. The seamstress called my name, asking if I was okay, and I said I was fine, and I kept scrolling. Mom, year 9. Update. I convinced her to do the airbrush makeup for $890. Told her it was a sister bonding experience. She cried when I suggested it. Dinah, year 9. Because she knows her face ruins photos. I'm doing damage control for MY wedding. She should be thanking me. Friend from college, year 9. Are you guys actually going to pay her back after the wedding? Long pause in messages. 3 days with nothing. Dinah, year 9. Why would we? She gave it as a gift. She never asked for contracts or payment plans. Legally, it's a gift. Marcus, year 9. Your sister is funding our entire lives and you're just okay with this. Dinah, year 9. My Holliff sister funded a wedding she'd never have herself. I gave her purpose. She should be grateful. The word grateful hit different, sitting there in all caps, and I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been holding together for 12 years with string and hope and deliberate blindness. I scrolled further, looking for the beginning, looking for the moment this became the plan. Found it in year 6, 3 months after Dad's death. A message from Mom to Dinah, just the two of them before the group formed. Mom, year 6. We need to talk about Layla and the trust fund. Your father told me something before he died. Dinah, year 6. What trust fund? Mom, year 6. The one your grandfather set up. $3 million. It was supposed to go to my sister's daughter. Your Aunt Sophie, who died in childbirth. Dina, year 6. Okay, but Aunt Sophie died like 30 years ago. What does this have to do with anything? Mom, year 6. Layla is Aunt Sophie's daughter. Not mine. I adopted her after Sophie died, but I never told her. Your father wanted to tell her when she turned 18, but I convinced him to wait. And now he's gone, and she still doesn't know. I stopped reading, my vision blurring, the phone shaking in my hands. The seamstress was talking to me, her voice concerned, asking if I needed water, if I needed to sit down, and I said no thank you in a voice that didn't sound like mine, and I kept reading because I had to know, I had to see all of it. Dina, year 6. Wait, so Layla isn't actually my sister? She's my cousin? Mom, year 6. Biologically, yes. But I forged the birth certificate years ago to make her legally mine. The trust fund opens when she turns 30. That's in 4 years. If she finds out the truth before then, she could contest the adoption, claim I defrauded her, and I'd lose control of the money. Dina, year 6. Control of the money? I thought you said it was her trust fund. Mom, year 6. It is. But as her legal mother and guardian at the time of the trust creation, I'm the trustee until she turns 30. If she never finds out about it, the money defaults to me after 7 years of inactivity. She turns 30, doesn't know to claim it, and by the time she's 37, it's legally mine. Dina, year 6. That's actually brilliant. But what if she finds out? Mom, year 6. We keep her busy. Keep her feeling needed. Keep her focused on taking care of us. She's already given us 2 years of mortgage payments and your therapy and your tuition. If we can keep this going for 4 more years, she'll turn 30, never know about the trust, and we'll be set. Dina, you're 6. What about her face? Won't she eventually get confident enough to ask questions? Mom, you're 6. That's the insurance policy. As long as she thinks she's lucky we accept her despite the birthmark, she'll never push back. People who think they're fundamentally unlovable don't ask for things. They just give. I dropped the phone, and it clattered on the boutique floor, and the seamstress rushed over. And Mom came out of the bathroom asking what happened, and I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my mother's face. I need to go, I said, my voice steady despite everything breaking inside me. But we haven't finished the fitting, the seamstress protested. I'm done with fittings, I said, and I walked out of the boutique in the pin dress, and I drove home in it, and I didn't cry until I was alone in my childhood bedroom that wasn't actually my childhood bedroom because this wasn't actually my family. I turned 30 in 2 weeks, on the 15th of March, exactly 6 days before Dinah's wedding on the 21st. The trust fund letter arrived on my birthday, certified mail requiring signature, sent to my attention at the house address. Mom tried to intercept it, standing by the mailbox like she'd been waiting, but the postal carrier knew me, asked to see my ID, and handed it directly to me despite Mom's protests that she could sign for her daughter's mail. Inside was a letter from a law firm in Boston informing me that the trust established by my grandfather James Sullivan for his granddaughter Layla Sullivan, biological daughter of Sophie Sullivan, would be available for my claim now that I'd reached the age of 30. Total value including 30 years of compound interest was $3.2 million, and I had 90 days to provide documentation proving my identity and relationship to Sophie Sullivan. The lawyer's name was Margaret Chen, and her direct phone number was at the bottom of the letter, and I called it while standing in the driveway with Mom watching from the front door. Margaret answered on the second ring, and I said, "My name is Layla Sullivan, and I just received a letter about a trust fund, but I think there's been a mistake because my mother's name is Nadia Osman, not Sophie Sullivan." "Miss Sullivan," Margaret said, her voice kind but professional, "I think you and I need to have a conversation about your adoption and your birth certificate. Can you come to Boston, or would you prefer I come to you?" "Come to me," I said, watching Mom's face go white through the window. "As soon as possible, please." Margaret arrived the next day, a tiny woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a leather briefcase that looked older than me. She sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the house, and she spread documents across the table between us, and she showed me the truth in authenticated copies and legal filings and hospital records that couldn't be forged. My mother, Sophie Sullivan, died in childbirth at 23, and her twin sister Nadia held baby Layla in the delivery room, and Nadia promised to raise me as her own. My father, Aziz, knew the truth, married Nadia when I was 2, adopted me legally and genuinely, gave me his last name, and loved me like I was his blood. But Nadia forged a new birth certificate when I was 5, erasing Sophie's name completely, making it look like she'd given birth to me, doing it to secure control of the trust fund that my grandfather established before he died when I was 7. She's been committing fraud for 25 years, Margaret said, her finger on the forged birth certificate. And based on what you've told me about the money you've given her, she's also been financially exploiting you while preventing you from accessing your own inheritance. Can I get it back?" I asked. "The $438,000 I gave them." "We can try," Margaret said. "But first, we need to secure the trust fund and file a fraud report. Once we do that, everything Nadia has done becomes evidence, including the financial exploitation. Do you have documentation of the money you gave her?" I pulled out my phone and opened the spreadsheet. Every payment tracked and categorized and dated, 12 years of my financial life reduced to rows and columns, and I showed it to Margaret, and she smiled for the first time. "This is perfect," she said. "This is exactly what we need." The wedding was 6 days away, and I had a choice to make. I could file the fraud report immediately, cancel the wedding, blow up everything in a moment of justified rage. Or I could wait, Let them think they'd won, let Dinah have her perfect day funded by money she thought I'd given freely, and then burn it all down when they least expected it. I chose option 3, the one Margaret suggested with a gleam in her eye that told me she'd been waiting her entire career for a case like this. I would go to the wedding, stand in my long-sleeved, high-necked bridesmaid dress, smile for photos they'd crop me out of anyway, and then during the reception, during the speeches, I would take the microphone and tell 300 people the truth. But first, I needed to secure the evidence where Nadia couldn't destroy it. I went back to the house while Mom was at her charity board meeting, and I went through her office like the accountant I was, methodical and thorough, photographing every document I found. Bank statements showing withdrawals from accounts I didn't know existed. The original forged birth certificate in a locked drawer I picked open with a hairpin and patience. Printed copies of the group chat messages, apparently kept as insurance against Dina, proof that Mom was always 3 steps ahead of everyone. And in the very back of the bottom drawer, wrapped in tissue paper like something precious, I found a letter in my father's handwriting, addressed to me, dated 2 days before he died. "My dearest Layla," it started, and my hands shook holding it. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Nadia never gave this to you like I asked her to. I need you to know the truth about where you came from, who your mother was, and how much you were loved before you ever took a breath." He told me everything, the whole story of Sophie and her twin sister Nadia, how different they were, how Sophie was the brave one and Nadia was the careful one, how Sophie got pregnant at 22 by a man who left when he found out, how she decided to have me anyway despite the birthmark the ultrasound revealed, how she told the doctors she didn't care what I looked like, that I was already perfect, to her. "She died so you could live," Dad wrote, "and Nadia promised to love you the way Sophie would have." For a while, I thought she did. But over the years, I've watched her use your insecurity about your appearance to control you, to make you small, to keep you grateful for crumbs. This is not love. This is not what Sophie wanted for you. The birthmark, he continued, was Sophie's favorite thing about you. She saw it on the ultrasound, and she cried happy tears. And she said that's how I'll always recognize her. That's her sign. She's going to be extraordinary. She was right. You are extraordinary, not despite the mark, but because of everything it represents. You survived when she didn't. You carry her with you on your face. Never let anyone make you ashamed of that. I sat on the office floor reading and rereading the letter until I had it memorized, and then I photographed it front and back, and I put the original in my purse, and I left everything else exactly where I'd found it so Nadia wouldn't know I'd been there. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, 78 degrees and cloudless, the kind of March day in Pasadena that made people understand why they charged $12,000 just for the venue. I arrived early in my bridesmaid dress, long sleeves and high neck, and a colored Dinah called Dusty Sage that made my skin look sallow. And I helped set up even though I wasn't asked to, arranging favors and checking the seating chart and making sure the photographer had the shot list. Dina ignored me during hair and makeup, laughing with her college friends while someone painted her face to perfection. And when the makeup artist asked if I wanted a touch-up, Dina said she already had the airbrush done at home. We're good, even though I hadn't, even though my face was completely bare. The ceremony happened without me in it, because Dina decided last minute that she wanted only her college friends as bridesmaids, and I could be a personal attendant instead, which meant holding her bouquet during the vows and fixing her dress and staying out of the photographs. I stood behind the photographer and watched my sister marry a man who'd laughed about my face in a group chat, and I smiled when people glanced my way, and I waited. The reception started at 5:30 with cocktails and past appetizers, and I circulated through the garden making sure everything ran smoothly, because that's what I did. That's who I'd always been, the person who made things work behind the scenes. Dinner was served at 7, 4 courses of elevated comfort food that cost $187 per person, and I ate at a table in the back with distant cousins who didn't know me, and I watched Dinah glow at the head table, and I waited. Speeches started at 8:15, right on schedule according to the timeline I'd helped create. Dinah's best friend talked about college adventures. Marcus's brother told embarrassing childhood stories. Mom stood up in her designer dress that I'd paid for, $4,000 of silk and beading, and she talked about her beautiful daughter and how proud she was, and how family was everything, and how love was the greatest gift we could give each other. She didn't mention me once in 7 minutes of speaking, and when she sat down, people applauded, and Dina wiped away perfect tears, and I stood up. The microphone was on a stand near the head table, and I walked to it before anyone could stop me, and I adjusted the height because I was taller than Mom, and I looked out at 300 faces turning toward me with confusion because I wasn't on the speech list. "Hi, everyone," I said, my voice steady and clear through the speakers. "For those who don't know me, I'm Layla, and I paid for this wedding." Confused laughter rippled through the crowd, people thinking it was a joke. A funny opening to a maid of honor speech even though I wasn't the maid of honor. "I'm not kidding," I continued. "Every single thing you've experienced tonight, from the venue to the food to the flowers to the dress Dinah is wearing, was funded by me. $438,500 over the last 2 years, on top of the $267,000 I gave them in the 10 years before that." The laughter stopped, and Dina stood up, her face going from confused to angry, and Mom grabbed her arm, pulling her back down, and Marcus just stared. "I gave them that money," I said, touching my left cheek, my fingers tracing the birthmark, "because they convinced me I had to. Because I thought I was their family, and I thought family meant giving until there was nothing left. Because they made me believe that someone who looked like me should be grateful anyone accepted her, and that acceptance had a price tag." Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough to carry in the silence. 3 weeks ago, I found a group chat called The Mark. I continued, pulling out my phone, and I projected it onto the screen behind me where they'd been showing the slideshow of engagement photos, and I scrolled through the messages, letting everyone read them. Dina's comment about my face, Marcus's questions about the money, Mom's explanation of the trust fund fraud, all of it displayed in 12-foot-high letters for 300 witnesses to see. Yesterday, I met with a lawyer named Margaret Chen, I said, gesturing to where Margaret stood near the entrance, briefcase in hand, ready. "And I learned that my mother Nadia isn't actually my mother. She's my aunt. She forged my birth certificate 25 years ago to gain control of a $3.2 million trust fund that my real mother Sophie left me before she died giving birth to me." The gasps were audible this time, people turning to look at Nadia, who'd gone completely white, her hands gripping the table edge. "Sophie died so I could live," I said, my voice breaking for the first time, "and before she died, she saw this birthmark on an ultrasound, and she said it was her sign, that it made me extraordinary. And Nadia took me, and she promised to love me the way Sophie would have, and instead she used my insecurity about the thing my mother loved most to control me for 30 years. I pulled out Dad's letter, and I read the whole thing aloud, every word he wrote about Sophie's courage and Nadia's betrayal, and how the birthmark was never something to hide. "So here's what happens next," I said, looking directly at Dina, then at Mom. "Margaret is filing fraud charges on Monday morning. The trust fund is being secured under my name with the original birth certificate as proof. Every dollar I gave you over 12 years is being claimed as financial exploitation of a fraud victim, which means you'll have to pay it back with interest. And this wedding," I continued, gesturing to the decorated garden, the string lights, the flowers, "is the last thing my money will ever buy you. I hope it was worth it. I hope every bite of this food tastes like the lies you told. I hope every photo you take reminds you of the person you tried to erase." I put the microphone back on the stand, and I walked toward the exit, and the crowd parted for me, 300 people silent and staring. Dinah's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and desperate. "You can't do this. This is my wedding day." I turned back and I pulled my phone out one more time, and I projected one final image onto the screen. The spreadsheet showing every payment, every date, every dollar, 12 years of my life reduced to data. "You're right," I said. "It's your wedding day. The one I paid for. The one you planned knowing I'd never have one of my own, because who would marry someone who looks like this, right? That's what you said in the chat. I hope you remember that every anniversary." I left through the garden gate, and I heard the chaos start behind me, voices rising, someone crying, chairs scraping, but I didn't look back. Margaret met me in the parking lot, and she handed me a folder with copies of every document we'd filed, and she said, "That was incredibly brave." "No," I said, looking at my reflection in her car window, the birthmark dark against my skin in the evening light. "Brave was my mother deciding to have me anyway. I'm just finally living up to her choice." I drove to the cemetery for the first time in 3 years, and I sat by Dad's grave in my dusty sage bridesmaid dress, and I told him I remembered both promises now, the one about taking care of them and the one about being perfect. "I took care of them," I whispered to the headstone. "But I forgot I was perfect." "Sophie knew it. You knew it. And I'm sorry it took me 30 years to figure it out." The legal case took 8 months, and it ended with Nadia pleading guilty to fraud and being ordered to repay $212,000, which was all the court could prove was exploitation versus gifts. Dina divorced Marcus after 6 months when he left her for someone else, someone whose beauty didn't come with a side of family scandal. The trust fund money sat in my account, $3.2 million that I didn't touch for almost a year because I didn't know what Sophie would want me to do with it. Then I figured it out. I started a foundation for children born with visible differences, port wine stains and cleft palates and scars and anything else that made people stare. We funded medical treatments for families who wanted them and counseling for families adjusting and education programs for schools teaching kids that different didn't mean less. I named it the Sophie Sullivan Foundation, and I put her picture on the website, young and brave and 23, and I wrote her story, how she died so I could live, how she loved my birthmark before she ever saw it in person. And I stopped covering it, stopped angling for good lighting, stopped wearing scarves in family photos because I wasn't part of that family anymore. I had coffee with Margaret once a month, and she became the friend I didn't know I needed, the person who saw my face and my bank account and my history and just saw me. On my 31st birthday, I got a letter forwarded from Nadia's lawyer, no return address, just a single page in Dinah's handwriting. "I'm sorry," was all it said, and it wasn't enough, but it was something, and I filed it away with all the other documents from that year, evidence of everything that happened, everything that changed. I never wore long sleeves to hide my neck again, and I never said I was grateful for acceptance I had to purchase, and I never forgot that the mark on my face was Sophie's sign, her way of recognizing me, her proof that I survived. Some people still stare, and children still ask questions, and strangers still offer unsolicited advice about treatments and makeup and ways to minimize my difference. But now when they do, I think about 300 people watching those messages scroll across a screen, and I think about Dinah's perfect wedding crumbling in real time, and I think about the foundation bearing Sophie's name, and I smile. Because the face they tried to make me hide is the same face on every legal document that destroyed them, the same face that claimed $3 million they thought they'd stolen, the same face that turned their cruelty into proof of fraud. I'm not the grateful one anymore, and I'm not the lucky one, and I'm definitely not the mark. I'm Sophie's daughter, the one she died to give life to, the one she marked as extraordinary before I ever took a breath. And that's worth more than any amount of money they could have taken, more than any wedding they could have planned, more than any acceptance they could have sold me. I was always perfect exactly as I am. It just took me 30 years and $438,000 to remember it.